Sex is the life force energy that runs through us all. Can you use sexual energy for your spiritual evolution, or perhaps for emotional healing? Is it even possible? Clinical sexologist Dr. Martha Tara-Lee will explore all these and more on Eros Evolution on Om Times Radio.
Hi, this is Dr. Christine Horner, and I'm actually a guest with Dr. Martha Tara-Lee on her show. And we have an interesting situation because she is in Bali. And so she notified me today that the connections that she has there aren't very good and asked if I could do the show myself. I said, absolutely, I could. So let me give you a little background about myself. I am a board-certified general surgeon, a board-certified plastic surgeon, and worked as a plastic surgeon for about 12 years, and during that time I was doing a lot of breast reconstructive surgery. I had a special interest in breast cancer because my mom had been a breast cancer patient. And in very short order, I started becoming quite alarmed because I was noticing my patients becoming younger and younger, and finally I was doing breast reconstruction on women in their 20s. And I thought, okay, something's wrong. There's, got to be something that women can do to help to lower their risk. And this was about 20 years ago, so at that time there really wasn't much of a conversation in our society about natural health. But what I did then was to go through the medical research and start looking for answers and just see if there was anything that research could point out that would help women to avoid getting this disease. And I literally found thousands of studies that showed exactly why we have a breast cancer epidemic, everything we're doing to contribute to it, all the things that we traditionally don't do in our culture that are highly protective, and they are all natural. So food, supplements, herbs, lifestyle choices. And really 95% of the cases of breast cancer could be prevented just through diet and lifestyle alone. And I found then that was pretty much true for most all chronic diseases. And so my path really took me into teaching about how to avoid the knife, as I say. And I'm now the author of several books. The first book, Waking the Warrior Goddess, which is on all the natural approaches to protecting against and fighting breast cancer. And it actually won the best health book of the year when it came out. And my most recent book that just came out is called Radiant Health, Ageless Beauty, and it's about everything that you need to know in order to create extraordinary health and longevity. So on this particular show, we're going to be talking very specifically about several different types of diseases that women tend to keep hush-hush. They don't want to talk about it, but there's a lot of different natural approaches that have been shown to be highly effective and in some cases much more effective than what we have in Western medicine. So the problem with not talking about your diseases, and again, this is something that, can be embarrassing and there can be some stigma with it. So things like sexually transmitted diseases, depression or other mood disorders, breast cancer, of course, and then also autoimmune diseases. And again, a lot of people don't want to share them because, like I said, it's embarrassing or they feel like there's some sort of, stigma with it and it could affect them in their jobs. But it's actually the worst thing that you can do because what the research shows is that of all the things that affect our health, more than diet, more than smoking, and more than genetics, is feeling loved and supported. The number one thing. And the opposite of that is being in toxic relationships. And so that's the most damaging stress that we can have in our body is being in toxic relationships. And you can do everything right in your life, but if your relationships aren't great, then it's going to be something that can really damage your health. So it's super important to make sure that you bring your friends and family members that you trust to help to support you with your health, and also if you're trying to recover from disease. So let's just start with the sexually transmitted diseases. And the most common one is HPV virus. And we've heard a lot about this. There's been a lot in the news, and also they're pushing the vaccines on the young children. And the truth about HPV, which is actually a good thing, is that if you get the infection, 98% of the time it goes away on its own. So having a strong immune system is really important. If you have some sort of, problem with your immune system, if your diet's poor, if you're smoking, excessively drinking, those kinds of things, it really causes your immune system to dip and can put you more at risk for developing this chronic infection. So about 70% of sexually active adults are exposed to the HPV virus, so it's the most common sexually transmitted disease, but as I said, it goes away 98% of the time. Now, the problem is if in the 2% of people that get these chronic HPV infections, there's no effective Western treatment that can get rid of the virus. And the only recommendation that they give to you is to have pap smears and depending on, the situation, what they're looking for is a possibility of developing cervical cancer because we find that HPV infection is present in 99% of all cervical cancers, so there's definitely a link with it. So it's just kind of this watchful waiting and looking and, doing pap smears and then treating with surgery or topical chemicals to try to manage it, which isn't exactly the greatest way, to go, and there certainly can be complications with it. So what's real exciting is there's some research that just was published out of MD Anderson and University of Texas Health Sciences, where they tested a mushroom formula. It's called AHCC, which stands for Active Hexose Correlated Compound, which is why we call it AHCC. But it's an extract that's taken from shiitake mushrooms, and it's from Japan. And it's actually widely used in Japan. They found that it is the most effective formula in being able to support every single cell type in the immune system and does it so effectively that it actually lowers the risk of many different kinds of cancers, from breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, liver cancers, even melanoma. And if you actually get cancer in Japan, they will treat you with AHCC because the survival statistics are so much better. So what they did was the researchers in Texas was to take this formula because they knew it also had antibacterial and antiviral formulas or activities, and they tested it against the HPV virus. So initially what they found was that it killed the virus. They tested it in animals, and it killed the virus in animals. So then they did a clinical trial on women who had the chronic HPV infection. Again, there's no effective Western treatment in eradicating that virus. And they found that the vast majority of the women in this small clinical trial, that it completely eradicated the HPV within 6 months. So now they're doing a big clinical trial to substantiate those statistics. But like I said, super exciting that we can have this simple mushroom formula that does not have any side effects. It's just got great side benefits as far as really supporting your immune system, and it can completely eradicate this virus. So when there's, many other things that women don't want to discuss, and I'll start a little bit here. We're going to take a break in a few minutes, but mood disorders. And it's kind of sad, really, the extent of mood disorders that we have currently. And in fact, like 1 in 5 women are on antidepressants. And what we're finding, though, however, with depression is that there's quite a few things that you can do, like simple, natural things that can make a huge difference. And fortunately, there's several different holistic psychiatrists that are now talking about this, where when we have depression and, does it make sense to take antidepressants, or does it make more sense to look at why do you have depression? Because oftentimes it comes from having nutritional deficiencies, or not exercising enough, or your relationships or so forth. So there's some simple things, and we'll talk about that when we come back from the break, but we'll talk about these simple things that you can do that can really make a big difference in these mood disorders. And I know, feeling depressed is something that's got a lot of stigma with it, and again, many people do not share that with their family and friends, and again, it's so important to do that. And in fact, one of the things that helps to alleviate depression more than anything is really hanging out with your good friends. And I know that you certainly had that experience when you've been with people that you really love and enjoy being with, that you just get super uplifted, and whatever kind of troubles that are ailing you at this, particular time, that they just get so much better. So one of the things with depression also is not exercising enough. And we know that is a real problem with most Americans. About 80% of us don't get enough exercise. And there's a lot of different studies that show that getting rigorous exercise, so going out and doing, aerobic exercise, or even brisk walking, like 30 minutes a day or so, that it is just as effective as taking antidepressants. So, we know that antidepressants have so many different side effects that are associated with them, and they can take a long time to take effect, but again, have many different side effects associated with them. And so, if you can make some simple diet and lifestyle choices that make a difference, and being able to correct it just as effectively, that's the way that I strongly encourage that people go. Another important thing is to really make sure that you clean up your diet as much as you can, knowing that you're eating things that don't have high nutrients in them, carbohydrates, junk foods, sugar in particular. These cause your blood sugar levels to really soar, and then when they drop like that, that can cause depression. So those are some real simple things, and we'll talk about some more when we come back from the break.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hi, I'm Kelly Fox, host and astrologer of The Astrology Show. Each week, I'll give you access to the current transits, which are a valuable tool that provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has. Understanding the stars can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, be sure to tune in to The Astrology Show for guidance, Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Every 2 minutes, an American is sexually assaulted. The majority of victims know their attacker. It could be your friend, your neighbor, or someone you met at a party. If you said no, it's rape, and it's a crime. This is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Call the National Sexual Assault Hotline today at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit RAIN.org. That's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back. So we're going to continue our discussion on depression, and as I told you, it's a really, really common situation. In fact, the World Health Organization just came out with a statement saying that depression is the leading cause of ill health worldwide, and the incidence of it has increased tremendously. Just from 2005 to 2015, it increased by 18%. It's estimated that 11% of Americans over 12 years old are taking antidepressants, and 1 in 4 women after the age of 40. So super, super common. And again, we're really looking at the fact that this may not indicate that there's some brain chemistry problems, but rather it really can come from some diet and lifestyle issues, and also from being low in certain nutrients. So taking a look at the nutrients, for instance, vitamin D is something that actually acts more like a hormone in our body, and there's been a real explosion in research in this area in the last decade or so, and what we've found is that about 80% of Americans have low vitamin D levels, and there's all sorts of increased instances of various different kinds of diseases when you have low vitamin D. So because it's important to the normal functioning of every single cell, that's why we can get such a strong influence on so many different kinds of diseases. So, for instance, low vitamin D levels are associated with an increased risk of breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and you can just go on, and we find that there's this very, very strong association. And so if you supplement with vitamin D and get your levels up to that therapeutic dose, then a lot of these disease, the incidences of them go much lower, and in some cases we can actually reverse them. So a good example is depression. So vitamin D is actually associated with depression when the levels are low, and there's studies showing that when people take supplemental vitamin D and get their levels up into that kind of therapeutic range, then their depression gets significantly better. So the only way that you know what your blood levels are to get them checked, and you actually don't even need to go to a doctor's office for that. You can order this kit from the internet. There's a website called thepowerofd.org, and you can order the kit. It comes to your house, and basically it has the instructions in it, but basically what you're doing is pricking your finger, putting a dot of blood on a piece of paper, and then you send it in, and then they can tell you what your vitamin D levels are. And you're looking for a range of about 40 to 70 is kind of the considered the best. You can go a little higher, but that's really the best range. And so the recommendation is to check every 6 months or so that you can keep on top of it. And it used to be that we would recommend 400 international units a day, and since then we've recognized that that is far too low, and that most people need about 2,000 international units a day, and sometimes a lot more. So in certain disease states or in cancer states that we see, people's vitamin D levels can get very low, and so it's not uncommon for doctors to be prescribing 5,000, even 10,000 international units of vitamin D a day. And also everybody kind of metabolizes it differently, so you'll find whatever your unique amount is that you need to take, but like I said, usually a minimum of 2,000 a day is a thing that's really necessary. So I think that's kind of a good thing to do for overall health. We know that you manufacture vitamin D in your skin, but, in the wintertime, everybody's covered up. Most people are working, during the day, and so not that many people really get enough exposure to the sun. And this is an instance where I know that we doctors drive people crazy with this, where we reverse ourselves. But now the recommendation is to actually not wear sunblock and get out in the sun in the middle of the day and expose as much skin as possible for at least 30 minutes to an hour or so. Now, of course, you have to take into consideration about what your skin type is like and where you are. I mean, being out in the sun in the summertime in the northern climates is not like being in Miami Beach, so you have to be careful with that and not get burned. But definitely getting some exposure to your skin so you can manufacture it yourself is considered an optimal thing to do. Another thing is omega-3 fatty acids. So we villainized fat for a long time, and now we recognize that was a big mistake, another reversal. That it's really important that we get adequate amounts of fat, and it's pretty actually considered a lot of fat in our diet. Because all of our cell membranes are made out of fat. Our nerves are coated with fat. Our brain's coated with fat. Our hormones are made out of fat. And so it's extremely important to consume enough fat every day. But the most important thing is the type of fat that you consume. So there's good kinds of fats and bad kinds of fats. And the bad kinds of fats are the saturated animal fats, trans fats, which are the man-manipulated hydrogen ions added onto them, which have now been they're phasing those out because there's so many health problems with it, and the inflammation is really severe. And so the healthiest types of fats that you can consume are omega-3 fatty acids. And the sources for those include flax seeds, so flaxseed oil, and then also fish oils, And I think it's a great idea to take that every single day just for normal health, because like vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids are something that are, if you're low in them, they're associated with a significant increase in many different kinds of diseases, and including depression. And if you've got plenty of them, then your risk of having those diseases is significantly lower. The other kind of nutrients that sometimes help tremendously with depression are B vitamins, and then really making sure that you consume antioxidant-rich foods, and this is primarily a plant-based diet, so organically grown fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and omega-3 fatty acids. So that'll make a huge difference. And as I mentioned before, exercise is really critical. And I think all of you probably experience that too when you go outside and you're, exercising or playing. It just instantly elevates your mood. One thing that we don't pay that much attention to sometimes is our sleep. And we know, most people know, you're supposed to sleep 8 hours a night. But what a lot of people aren't aware of is that the absolute hours that you sleep are equally important. So what that means is, what time do you go to bed and what time do you get up? Now, 5,000 years ago, in a system of medicine called Ayurveda, which is the traditional system of medicine from India, it's the one I'm certified in and Deepak Chopra talks about, they recommended that you go to bed before 10 o'clock and you get up by 6 o'clock. And actually, modern research has tested, this theory, and what they found is that actually is absolutely true. And so what happens if you stay up late to like midnight on a regular basis, it actually causes severe hormonal imbalances, and so severe that it almost doubles your risk of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and certain cancers like breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colon cancer. So one of the major hormones involved with it is melatonin. And melatonin is our sleep hormone. So when it starts to get dark outside, your melatonin levels start to go up. You start to yawn and feel kind of sleepy. And if you go to bed before 10 o'clock, there is a spike in melatonin between midnight and 2 a.m. that you absolutely don't want to miss, because if you do, the consequences are really spectacular. Excuse me. So, as I said, it doubles your risk almost of developing heart disease and diabetes and obesity and then certain cancers, as well. So that's a simple free thing that you can do is really to back your bedtime up. And if you're a night owl, what's recommended is that you back your bedtime up 15 minutes each week. So every week you're going to bed 15 minutes earlier, and then you can naturally train your body to go to bed at that before 10 o'clock and then getting up by 6 o'clock. And I think you'll find you'll have tons more energy and feel a whole lot better too. And then stress is, another thing that can really lead to mood disorders. I mean, a lot of times we get situational, depression from stress. And again, from ancient systems of medicine, like Ayurveda recommended meditation, traditional Chinese medicine, they do Qigong and Tai Chi, and thousands of years ago, they recognized that it was extremely important to do an effective stress-reducing technique every day. And it doesn't have to be very long, just 20 minutes or so. And what it does is it trains your nervous system to not be so responsive. So you can have the same stress happening in your life, and your nervous system doesn't get as excited. It doesn't produce as many of those really damaging stress hormones. And so there's been over 500 or 600 studies that have been done on the type of meditation that I practice, which is called transcendental meditation. And what they found is that this simple mental technique, which is practiced 20 minutes twice a day, that it cut your risk virtually in half of every single, chronic disease that you could think of. So there's a study done in Canada where they looked at hospital admissions, and they found that people that practiced transcendental meditation were admitted to the hospital half as often for every single diagnosis, including accidents, and the only thing that it wasn't was pregnancy. That was it. So it's super important to really manage your stress, and I always think it's a great idea to really take a look at your life and just see what are the things that really stress you out the most, and then see if there's anything that you can do about it, because sometimes we have our life in such a place of decisions that we've made where we can actually change those things. Other times, there's stresses that we have no control over. But if you do have control over some of those stresses, then it's really good to just do an inventory of your life periodically and say, okay, how is this working for me? How, what's working, what's not working, and then make those adjustments, because stress is something that not only plays into depression, but also the National Institute of Health has said that 90% of all illnesses, mental and physical, that stress plays a significant role in those. And then finally, another kind of interesting fact is that a lot of our brain chemicals are actually manufactured in our guts, so like in our colon. It's actually considered a second brain because of the manufacturing of these neurotransmitters. And so your gut health actually has a lot to do with your mood. And cleaning up your diet is going to help a lot. You can also take probiotics or eat probiotic foods, so like fermented foods like sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha, a drink. So all of these have some wonderful bacteria in it that actually are super important for a lot of different functions in our body, and also in manufacturing these particular brain chemicals. And then finally, there's certain herbs that you can take and other nutritional supplements. So St. John's wort is something that most people have heard of, and there is good research showing that it helps with some mild depression. And then there's certain nutritional supplements that are actual precursors for making the brain chemicals, like 5-HTP for serotonin and theanine. So I'll pick up with you after the break.
Free your mind with Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment, a philanthropic organization. Their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hi, this is Julie Geigel.
And I'm Susan Schuler.
And I'm Lori Walker.
And we are
the Psychic Angel Channelers
from Angel Talk Tuesday.
Tune in every week at 10 a.m. Eastern on OmTimesRadio.com.
The angels have heard your call and are here to help.
Are you ready to receive?
Bathe in the beautiful vibrational frequency to help you heal, expand, and remember your magnificence with Angel Talk Tuesday.
What's up? This is Brad and Mike from Lincoln Park for LifeBeat, the music industry fights AIDS. Listen up, times are tough and you get a lot of things thrown your way. If you're being pressured to have sex and you're not ready, then say no. If you're having sex, be smart and use protection. Respect yourself and protect yourself.
For more information, call the National AIDS Hotline at 1-800-342-AIDS or log on to www.lifebeat.org.
And we're back. So we're going to talk about breast cancer. This is actually a subject that's really near and dear to my heart. It's what the subject that got me interested in natural health. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I wrote a book called Waking the Warrior Goddess, Dr. Christine Horner's program to protect against and fight breast cancer, that came out maybe 2005, and it won the Best Health Book of the Year, and now I've done 3 editions of it. So the last edition was a few years ago, and I added 150 pages to it because there's really been such an explosion of research in this area. And as I also mentioned previously, the research is really pointing out that about 95% of the cases of breast cancer could be prevented just through diet and lifestyle alone. So, huge number. So what causes breast cancer? I mean, that was kind of the big question, that I had when I was starting to investigate it. And we find that truly it is a diet and lifestyle disease. And if we look at the standard American diet, it's actually a recipe for breast cancer, prostate cancer, high blood pressure, colon cancer. I mean, all the typical diseases that we see in our culture right now is because we're really eating the wrong foods. We've gotten away from how we're supposed to eat, which is eating a plant-based diet that's organically grown fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. That's kind of the secrets to having extraordinary health as far as diet is concerned. So, when we look at a fast food meal, and this is actually, when they do surveys, they find that people who in the United States, that what's the most frequent type of food that they consume, and they find that it is eating fast foods, because it's most convenient. And so when you go through each thing that is, or we'll call it a food, that's not really that's in that meal, we find that it actually is something that is pro-carcinogenic. So red meat, for instance, they found that red meat, women who eat the most red meat have a 400% increased risk of breast cancer. And they put that burger, it's more like an industrialized product, but then they serve it to you in a white bun that's been stripped of every piece of fiber and nutrient from it, and now what we have is a refined carbohydrate. So when you eat sugar or refined carbohydrates, what happens is it gets absorbed into your system very quickly. It causes your blood sugar levels to spike, and then your body will crank out insulin to help to facilitate getting the glucose into your cells. Well, the problems with that is that they found that cancer's favorite food is glucose. So the more sugar you consume, the faster the tumors are going to grow. It also causes huge inflammation. Then the secondary thing is the hormone insulin. So these high glucose levels, cause the pancreas to release insulin, and insulin actually has been shown to be a growth factor for tumors too. So they check the membranes of the tumor cells and they find these little receptors for the insulin. So when insulin comes and hooks onto those receptors, it causes cells to grow and divide more rapidly. And so women who have the highest insulin levels in their body have a 283% increased risk of breast cancer. Number one vegetable consumed by Americans, French fries. I'm like, the Mayans ate 1,200 different kinds of plants, and we eat one, and we think, why are we sick? Well, we were actually designed to eat a really diversified diet. I know a lot of people get on these kicks of certain foods like kale, which is good for you, but you don't want to just overdose on one particular form of food. You want to make sure that you do a really diversified diet because, again, that's how we were designed, and you kind of take advantage of all the different pharmacies that are in each plant, which is, really unique. Being overweight, the statistics in the United States are pretty scary. It's like 60% of us are overweight or obese. And being obese is actually a risk factor for many different kinds of diseases, from the heart disease to depression to breast cancer. And postmenopausal, it's felt that at least 30% of postmenopausal breast cancers, that obesity is something that plays a huge role. And one of the reasons is that we find that breast cancer is a hormonal disease, so what that means is a hormone causes it to grow, and that hormone is estrogen. So anything that increases estrogen will increase the risk of developing breast cancer. So when you're overweight, the problem is that fat cells actually manufacture estrogen. It's not just the ovaries, and after menopause, all the estrogen is manufactured in the fat cells. So you have a lot more estrogen production that occurs. And also, there's other proteins that fat cells will produce that are pro-inflammatory, and we know that inflammation plays a key role in the initiation and progression of virtually every single chronic disease, including breast cancers. Alcohol, I'm always unpopular when I bring this one up, but they have actually found a direct relationship between the amount of alcohol that a woman consumes and her risk of developing breast cancer. So 1 drink a day increases the risk by 22%, or 11%, sorry. 2 drinks a day increases it by 22 to 40%, and 3 drinks a day, 33 to 70%. So the problem is that alcohol will have several ill effects. One is that it destroys the enzymes in the liver that help to break down the excess amount of estrogens. The next thing that it does is it destroys a B vitamin called folate, or folic acid, and folate is involved in the DNA repair mechanisms in our body. So, in other words, our DNA is getting attacked all the time from oxygen-free radicals and toxins, but we have these repair mechanisms that will recognize that damage and repair it. But if your folate levels are low, then the enzymes can't work adequately to repair the DNA, and you can get mistakes that occur in the DNA that is then passed on, and those when it gets passed on, generally it's a mistake that develops cancer. So the good news is that these researchers tested women by giving them alcohol to drink and then gave them folic acid supplements to take, so 20 to 40 micrograms a day when they were drinking, and they found that if they had 1 or 2 drinks, that the folic acid caused all the ill effects of alcohol to go away. However, if you have that 3rd drink, then it just zooms up the incidence of developing disease. So the moral of the story is it's okay to have a drink of a glass of wine or 2, but you've got to take folic acid when you're going to do that. And if you're not drinking, most people don't need to take folic acid supplements just normally unless you're pregnant. So, but again, that's something that can help to counteract it, if you're having alcohol. Like other diseases, not exercising increases the risk. If you exercise, it decreases the risk. So brisk walking will decrease the risk by 30%. If you do really rigorous activity, they found that it can reduce your risk by as much as 80%. Sleeping, again, and we talked about this with depression, but actually that's super involved in the incidence of breast cancer as well. So melatonin, or sleep hormone, actually has a lot of cancer protective actions too. It's a very powerful antioxidant, and it helps to stimulate the immune system, and it also regulates estrogen. So when the melatonin levels spike in the night, between midnight and 2 a.m., what they're doing is kicking up your immune system. They're decreasing the excess amount of estrogen, and so if you're staying up late, you miss all those actions. And it has such an influence that they found that women who work the night shift, who are the worst violators of the natural law that we should go to bed by 10 o'clock and get up by 6 o'clock, they found that their incidence of breast cancer was almost twice as high. So super important, to get that sleep. Another thing is actually our emotions. And at the beginning, I talked about how it was so important to share your illnesses with people that you love and trust to get your support, because it has the most influence on our health. And a good example is breast cancer. So we look at the area of the body, and there's been a tremendous amount of work done on this too, where we're now recognizing that behind any illness that we get, there's usually always emotion, and that in order to heal from a disease, you need to heal that emotion and that emotional trauma too, or else it's going to pop up in someplace else, or come back as a recurrence. And so in the area of the body where the breasts are, obviously that's overlying where the heart is. And so psychological studies of women who develop breast cancer, we're looking for commonalities, and some of the commonalities that they found is that they've been through some significant emotional trauma that broke their heart, so a lot of relationship issues. They can be in loveless relationships, having a distant father as they grew up, but any kind of toxic relationship. And I actually do consultations, telephone consultations for newly diagnosed breast cancer patients all over the world, and help them with an integrative approach, meaning helping them not only with their Western approach, which is extremely important if you do get breast cancer, to do a combination of Western medicine with complementary and alternative medicine to get the very best outcomes, but really cleaning up your diet in certain supplements and looking at the whole diet and lifestyle thing can make a tremendous improvement in your ability to live a long, healthy life if you've been diagnosed with this disease. And because I'm more holistic, I often get women who do consultations with me, and they seek me out because they're holistic, and they can say, I don't understand how I got this disease. I'm not overweight. I exercise. I eat a vegetarian diet. How could this happen? And I say, well, how are your relationships? And it's like, ugh. So that's how impactful, like I said, is the most impactful. So most people want to really focus on their diet and lifestyle, which is great, but just to know that the most important thing is actually doing the emotional work, which is more difficult, sometimes than overhauling your diet and your lifestyle. Now, there's certain kind of super foods or super supplements that have some great impact in being able to protect against developing breast cancer. And one of them is turmeric, which is that Indian spice, that bright yellow-orange color in curries. And this is actually the most studied plant in the medical research, 10,000 studies in the medical research, and a lot of it's being done here, including at MD Anderson. And what they found is that turmeric's almost too good to be true. And there's actually 150 different ways, mechanisms they have uncovered in which it helps to support our health. A very powerful anti-inflammatory, very powerful antioxidant, and many other things. And then it has 30 different specific anti-cancer properties to it. So it's considered the number one anti-cancer spice. It actually helps to inhibit 17 different kinds of cancers. So unless you're, cook Indian food all the time, this is something that I highly recommend taking as a supplement because you really want to take advantage of the incredible medicine that turmeric has to offer. And in order to get therapeutic doses in every day, then you really do need to take a supplement with it. Flax seeds are another one that are considered the number one anti-cancer food for breast cancer. And you can grind them up, add them to anything, or take them as a supplement. And when we come back, we'll talk about autoimmune diseases.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Join me, Tammy Adams, intuitive life coach and spiritual healer, for my new show, Karma Talk. Learn how to get rid of your karma so that you can start living the life you are meant to live. I am not going to tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. Join me on Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for Karma Talks on Om Time Radio.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
To get in the way before it happens.
To get a friend home safe.
And to not blame the victim.
It's on us.
To look out for each other.
To not look the other way.
It's on us to stand up.
To step in.
To take responsibility.
It's on us. All of us.
To stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Hi, this is Dr. Christine Horner filling in for Dr. Martha Tara Lee while she is on vacation in Bali, enjoying herself there. So we were just talking about the natural approaches to breast cancer prevention, and before I move on to talking about autoimmune diseases, I also want to just mention about menopause. So one of the things that we found that significantly increases the risk of developing breast cancer is hormone replacement therapy. And many of you are probably aware back in 2003 there was the Women's Health Initiative study that came out and said, oops, all the things that we thought that hormone replacement therapy would do, it was actually the opposite of that. In fact, it increased the risk of developing breast cancer, uterine cancer. It was something that could increase your risk of gallbladder disease and blood clots, and didn't protect against heart disease or Alzheimer's. So the prescribing practices kind of changed overnight, and what we found was the incidence of breast cancer went down by 7% the first year and 7% the second year. So we've been kind of steady at this point in time after that drop. And definitely we can get it to drop some more. But now I kind of see this alarming trend where people are going in to use bioidentical hormones instead. And, to me, that just doesn't make sense. We don't have long-term research. You have to actually follow people into the future for 20 years before you get accurate data on it. And the short-term research that we have shows that, yes, it's better than the pharmaceutical hormone replacement therapy, but it does still increase your risk of developing breast cancer. So for me, it just makes much more sense to say, okay, why do you have these, symptoms that are causing it? What can you do to reverse it? And simple things like going to bed before 10 o'clock, sometimes that induces enough balance into the body that the hot flashes go away, and I've had that happen with a number of women. And instead of taking these hormone replacement therapies, now the only instances I think it's really important for it is right after surgery. You go into sudden menopause if you have a hysterectomy, so it's important to take them for a year or two afterwards, but then try to get off of them if you can. And there are a number of natural substances that have been widely researched that have been found to be extremely effective. They're non-hormonal, and they don't increase your risk of developing breast cancer or any other types of diseases. So around the world, the cultures have been using these things for thousands of years. Like in South America, they use maca, which is a superfood known for giving good energy, but it's very hormonally balancing. And then flax seeds, as I mentioned before we went on the break, is considered the number one food for helping to lower the risk of breast cancer. It has about 12 different actions in which it does that, but also is hormonally balancing and helps to reduce the incidence of hot flashes as well as even PMS. And then there's a new product that, relatively new. It was actually used in Europe for the last 15 years. It's a supplement that's actually made from yellow flowers that look like daisies from Sweden. And what they found is that it works non-hormonally. They've researched it just like with the rigors that you would do with a pharmaceutical medication, and found that it is very effective for hot flashes, mood swings, night sweats, there's actually 2,000 OBGYNs that are now recommending it because of the level of research that was done on this nutritional supplement. So Relizen, R-E-L-I-Z-E-N, is another great choice. Okay, so with the time left, I want to talk a little bit about autoimmune diseases. And a lot of times, I've heard, we hardly even hear about those. They're not that common. And that's a good point, showing out that people don't talk about them when they have them, because they're very common. In fact, about 20% of people in the population, 1 out of 5 people, have an autoimmune disease, and these are things like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, psoriasis. So basically what autoimmune diseases are is that something's broken down in your immune system, where suddenly your immune cells are recognizing your own tissues as foreign, and they start to attack it. So like in rheumatoid arthritis, they start attacking your joints. In lupus, it starts attacking your connective tissues. Hashimoto's thyroiditis, obviously for the thyroid, but there's actually like 145 different autoimmune diseases, so it's very widespread. Now, the key thing is it almost doesn't matter which one you have. There's certain elements that are major contributors to developing them, and certain kind of natural approaches that will help for all of them too. There's actually a Dr. Keisha Ewers, Ewers, out of Seattle, who just came out with a book called The Autoimmune Puzzle, and she discusses, these various different things. And she used to have rheumatoid arthritis herself and then cured herself from it. And so her whole specialty is helping people to reverse these autoimmune disorders. So basically what's recognized is that in all people that develop these autoimmune disorders, that there is what we call leaky gut. And this is a term that is widely used in our culture now too, because it's so common. But basically what that means is that the cells in your gut, they're supposed to be completely stuck to each other, and there's because of inflammation and poor diet and not having the healthy bacteria in your gut, there can develop these little spaces between the cells. And then that allows some of the food particles to go out into your blood system that shouldn't be there. They should be inside the gut. And so when that happens, then your body will start to recognize that as foreign, develop antibodies, and then will develop antibodies to your own body too. So another thing that has been shown to be associated with it is toxicity. So this is, we're exposed to hundreds of chemicals every day, and this is in all of our personal care products and on our foods that are sprayed with herbicides and pesticides, and really in our air, our water, everything. We're just completely exposed to these toxins. And so the toxicity from the foods, we know, are a contributing factor. Another is actually emotional trauma, and I've spoken a lot about the effects of emotion, but almost universally what's been found is that there's some significant emotional trauma that occurs, and about 20 years later is when the onset of the autoimmune disease occurs. So if you develop one, it's like good to just kind of look back and go, I wonder, was there something that occurred back in your childhood or, 20 years from that time that was a significant emotional trauma. And then genetics also plays a role too. It's a smaller role, and I always say whatever genetics you have, you can kind of overpower them with a good diet, lifestyle, and doing the emotional work. But all those things kind of play into developing a autoimmune disease. And so in order to help to overcome that, you can do things to reverse it. So first, because of the toxins, you want to do a detoxification. And I'm certified in Ayurveda, the traditional system in medicine from India. And my first introduction to it actually was going to their detoxification program. Again, 5,000 years ago, it was recommended that you do detoxification several times a year. And this is a time when everything was organic. There weren't any of these chemicals. But it was recognized that just from emotional toxins, again, if you're eating when you're upset, then you don't digest your food fully, and that can act as particles that can kind of clog up your channels. So they have a detoxification program that is actually like luxurious spa treatments. There's lots of hot oils and massage and saunas and things like that. And the first time that I did it, within about 48 hours, I looked in the mirror and I thought I looked 10 years younger and never felt better in my life. So it's super important, even for normal people, to do a detoxification a couple of times a year because we're subjected to so many toxins now, and it just helps our bodies to function more normally. But if you have an autoimmune disease, it's crucially important in your ability to reverse that disease. Then working on healing the leaky gut. Again, this is cleaning up all the bad foods from your diet, the sugars, the processed foods, and really sticking with the organically fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And then also doing probiotics or fermented foods to get the good bugs in there. And then, looking at the emotional traumas, as I said, that's a really key important thing to do. There's so many different techniques that are out there now that help you with this release of the emotional trauma. And I just think it's wonderful because it's not like you have to be in therapy for 20 years with it. There's a whole lot of different techniques that where we understand that our nervous system holds on to these memories, and that you can do certain things like tapping, or you can do, there's, many other techniques that have been designed, and a lot of them, involve, body movement or massage types of, movements that can hit where these memories are stored and help to instantaneously release them. So in one session, sometimes you can get rid of some of the stored memories there, and it just it gets out of your neural network and then stops causing the havoc that it does for your body. But again, super important. I mean, I just can't even emphasize enough how important that is, since the research shows that of all the things that affect us, that seems to be the most important thing. Now, in my book, The Radiant Health, Ageless Beauty, I talk about, all the things that you need to either avoid or you need to favor in order to achieve extraordinary health. And it's based, it's kind of frameworked in Ayurveda, but it's based in modern research supporting all the different things that we recognize are super important. And so all the things that I've discussed today, they're in my book, and also I have a whole reference section in the back where you can find out where you can get treatments for these things. So it's drchristinehorner.com. That's drchristinehorner.com. Thanks so much for having me as your substitute for Dr. Martha Tara Lee.